Hello and welcome to the Full Body Fix. This is going to be an awesome show today. We are going to be talking about something that you obviously care very much about, and that is your body's mobility. And you realize that mobility is something that's so very important for a high functioning quality of life and to build the most ultimate version of you, right? That's one of the most important things is your body mobility. We're going to get into a little bit of science today. I'm going to play a little bit of the professor role. You might end up learning more about mobility than you actually ever really wanted to know about mobility. But what I can promise you is you will walk away with the tools to be able to get even more results in your body's mobility, maybe a lot more results than before you came to this show. So that's my goal. That's a pretty big, lofty goal. And let's see if that happens by the end here. You'll let me know in the end. I'll let you be the judge. So with that, let's get started. A lot of today's presentation will come from slideshow, but we will get into some action too. There's going to be a little bit of exercise, not a lot, a little bit of exercise, kind of use a physical example for what I'm teaching about and I'm educating you in. And then I'm going to give you some takeaway tools. So, and then our VIPs will get some extra takeaway tools, some new things I created that was going to really help assist you with the mobility testing that you've done this week. So for both our audience members and for my VIP family, I'm so happy to have you here. And without further ado, let's get started. All right, so today we are diving into how to optimize your body's mobility. And first of all, what exactly is mobility? What determines your mobility? And how can you optimize your mobility? We're going to be getting pretty deep on those three areas. That's going to be our focus for today's show. What exactly is mobility? What determines your mobility? And how can you optimize your mobility? So first thing I want to start with is a question to you. Go ahead and write in the chat, what do you think mobility is? What is mobility to you? Because it's this word that's so kind of popular, especially among our VIP family. But what exactly is that? What does it mean? What's important about that? And what is the definition to you? When you think about mobility, what does it mean for you? What mobility really is your body to move freely and unencumbered into each segment of your body's ideal range of motion, right? That's ideal. And I think Kim was basically the closest out of all entries in terms of, what is mobility? And more importantly, what is great mobility, right? What is great mobility? What is mobility? And more importantly, what is great mobility? So great mobility is a functional mobility, which means you both have symmetry in your mobility and your mobility is well stabilized without tissue restrictions that pull your body out of alignment. It's your body's ability to both allow balanced full motion and is well supported by motor control and tissue strength throughout those ranges of motion. In other words, great mobility can't be separated from its requirement to include optional functional strength. So I'm going to stop the slides here for a moment and illustrate a little bit further. So you see, it is most important that you have mobility first. And it's kind of like a big, among the elite experts in my field, there's kind of a big, like, what is first, mobility or stability? And it's kind of like, it's like chicken or egg, which one came first? You can't have one without the other. You need to have, if you don't have mobility, then you can't move into the range of motion to actually build the strength or have the motor control into that range of motion. So for many of you with hip or shoulder, neck, whatever the issue might be, for example, if you only have 65, 70 degrees of external rotation, well, how are we going to optimize that strength if you can't actually go into that range of motion, right? But then you also need to think about, okay, well, what if you do have the range of motion? Because there's people who have, 110 degrees. Is that better? Well, not necessarily, because if that joint and those tissues are unstable and they don't have the right mechanical characteristics and ability to stabilize that motion, then you're also going to run into trouble. So either can create pain, stiffness, and dysfunction. And oftentimes, even when you have enough mobility, you'll still feel stiffness. And the reason why is because it's not balanced or aligned. So it's really the inner workings of all these things that really need to happen to have optimal mobility. And with that being said, we have to create that mobility first, right? So if you don't have the mobility, then we can't optimize it. So first is getting that aligned symmetrical mobility. And what determines your mobility, right? That's the next big question, is what determines your mobility? And there's two major factors that determine your mobility. One is your neuromuscular setting, and the other is your connective tissue. And I'm going to get pretty deep on both of these. So in terms of your neuromuscular setting, first, your neuromuscular setting. So in other words, your neurological system and the way it connects to the tissue. We're going to get into like the contractile fiber and the connective tissue and how all that works. But you need to know that there's two components. There's your neurological connection, and then also that contractile fiber component, okay? So, and also the connective tissue component. So in terms of your neuromuscular setting, think about this, is that I'm going to pause. I'm going to remove the screen share again from this. So you have something called the resting length. And your resting length is basically the midpoint of the tissue. So in the midpoint of the tissue contraction, so like in the bicep, at that midpoint, that's going to be the strongest point. Well, that gets adapted by the way you sit, by the way you stand, by the way you sleep, by the way you hold your pelvis, by the way you hold your thoracic, your upper back and your spine and your shoulder. All the tissues in your body get adapted depending on what kind of positions you stay in. And you don't have to necessarily be exercising to change that resting length position in terms of where's the midpoint of the strength. So for example, if you're sitting, right, when you sit, which most of you are sitting now, your hip flexors are shortened. In other words, I'll show you a little bit closer. So your thighs like this. So this is your hip flexor. So your hip flexor is in a shortened position. Your knee is also bent. And with your knee bent, your hamstring is shortened. So when you stay in that position, your hamstring shorten and your hip flexors shorten. And when you spend a lot of time there, what happens is the tissue, which I'll get more into the connective tissue. And it's important for you to kind of know these things, because once you know the background, then you're able to start targeting and figuring out, you're figuring out where your issues are. So by the end of this, you're going to have all the tools to really think about your body in a different way. So in terms of the resting length, here's what happens. All of the encasing around the muscle fiber is it's viscous. In other words, it's like an elastic moldable structure. And if you go in a short position, it's going to mold to getting shorter. If you go in long positions, it's going to mold over time to getting longer. So depending on how you are sitting, standing, walking, holding your body, exercising, of course, is also a big one. Your neurological system and your tissues will start to mold to that. So what happens is also the actual contractile muscle fiber, which I don't want to get into yet because we're going to get into that in point 2, is it learns to get strong in the position that you normally hold it in. So think, and that's why body alignment is so important in training. So if you think about that, right? So in other words, if I do a squat and I do a big arch in my lower back while I'm squatting, then what happens? Well, my tissue learns that it should function in a short position. And so it starts to change all the mechanical characteristics of the tissue to function in that short position, which is why body alignment is really so important. So all those things affect that thing called resting length. Then the next item that affects your neuromuscular setting is your stability pattern. Now, this could be good or bad. Good is great body alignment. In other words, you focus in supporting. So what is proximal? Proximal support tissues like your core, your abdomen, all that for my VIPs, all that scapular stabilization work we do. Why do we do that? Because it's towards the center stabilization point of the body. You need to be stable towards the center point of your body so that when you work distally, in other words, further from the center of the body, it has good support at the center. If you don't have good support at the center of your body, then you'll never have good support further away from the center of your body. Okay, that's the way it works. And what does that have to do with mobility? I thought we were talking about mobility. Well, it has everything to do with mobility, you see, because in terms of the neuromuscular setting, what happens is if your body feels lack of support, if it feels unstable, it will go into what's called muscle guarding. It will brace, it will shorten, it will make your contractile fibers, which you're going to learn what is that versus connective tissue in a moment, but your contractile fibers will get shorter they'll contract, they'll constrict your motion. So when you have good body patterns and alignment, you actually improve your mobility. So mobility is not just stretching, it's actually having good mobility, good alignment, so your body can feel free to allow motion to happen. And then of course, bad would be poor muscle recruitment patterns, short functioning, like glute medius, short hamstring, posterior pelvic tilt, kyphosis, or tight hip flexors, which lead to anterior pelvic tilt and tight low back. So let me explain all that mumbo jumbo, what exactly all that means here. So, okay. So for example, that glute med thing there, if you're standing, when you stand on one leg, let me adjust my screen here. When you stand on one leg, right, which we do a lot of this exercise through our systems, when you stand on one leg and your muscle of the glute medius, which attaches here and into here, so top of the femur and then top of the pelvis here, okay, attaches here. If you're kind of doing this type of thing, like lifting the side up, or so common, right? Lunges. I send lots of videos to our VIPs about this. So you're doing a lunge and your hips out like this. Your knee down here, which you can't see mine now, but let's say it's totally aligned. Foot's here, knee's aligned, but your hip is out. What's happening? The tissue's going long, and so it's learning to function in a longer position, which makes it change its resting length, change its mechanical characteristics to now go long. Well, what happens with that? Well, because the glute medius is weak and going long, then other tissues that aren't supposed to do the job, like this muscle that runs here, comes down and attaches to the outside of your knee, through outside of your knee, it starts getting tight and pulled on and muscle guarded because that muscle's not functioning in that perfect, ideal aligned position. Okay, so all those things also have to do with mobility and is what comes back to creating that neuromuscular setting of your tissues. Okay, so then the next thing, and short hamstrings, we gave some examples of that. You could think about, you know, if you're functioning in a short hamstring type of positions, posterior pelvic is your butt tucked under. You know, a lot of people have this rounded back posture, especially as you age, and your tissues adapt to that. And so if one tissue is going long, the other side of the body is going short, and you overall create dysfunction in your body mechanics. So those are all neuromuscularly setting the tissue. The next thing, kinesiophobia. All right, so this is a big one. We've all, probably 98% of us have been exposed to kinesiophobia at one time. Okay, so, or many times in our life, I should say. So kinesiophobia is your fear of movement. Kinesio referring to body motion and movement. So it's the fear of movement. So for example, if you injure an area of your body, it doesn't have to be an acute injury. In other words, an accident, could be a chronic overuse injury that's developed over time. But either one, when you get that pain and that damage in your body, what happens is your sensory system, your nervous system, has sensors that sense chemicals. It senses damage to the tissue. It senses position. It senses all kinds of things. So when those tissues get damaged, what it does is send out chemicals and signals, and your body starts to receive this message that, oh, this area is damaged. Okay, we're going to change. So that's sensory. That's what we call afferent signaling. We're going to change the efferent, the motor action that we send back to allow that body area to function. And what we're going to do is decrease. We're going to shut down that body area for function. And so what happens is when you get injured and you don't really go to, like, honestly, like the nth degree to redevelop the mechanics of that body area, some of the tissues will stay more dormant, not totally dormant usually, but more dormant, and it'll start using other muscles that it's not supposed to use. So for example, when you lift your arm and shoulder, you should have good scapular stability, and the scapula should come down as the arm goes up. But when you get injured, your body will start to learn and shut off certain tissues. It'll make your upper traps work when they shouldn't, and elevate the shoulder, change your body alignment to be totally, basically dysfunctional, because it's trying to just protect those tissues that were injured. And mobility, the tissues will start to shorten because, of course, anytime you get injured, you lose range of motion. You remember that all the encasing, which we're going to talk about deeper in a moment, all the encasing around the muscle fiber starts to shorten. It's viscous. So now it goes to a shorter position, and it changes all the mechanical characteristics of the tissue. And when I explain the next item, then everything I just said will actually start to make even more sense. You'll see how the tissues really work. And then we'll get into the best part, which is, okay, what to do about all this stuff to make your body awesome. All right, so going back into that's what kinesiophobia is, and that will develop major issues on your body if not super well taken care of after those type of injuries. Next component is mental emotional trauma. So mental emotional trauma, this one is really interesting. You know, when you think about exercise and fitness and all this stuff, yeah, I'm sure you think about, you know, improves your self-confidence and all these type of things. But how much have you thought, I know some of my VIPs are pretty smarty pants and functional medicine practitioners and such, but how much have you thought about trauma, emotional trauma that you hold in your body from childhood, from different things that have happened to you, from stress in your daily environment? Could be argument with a spouse or a kid, could be anything, but all those emotional things that you take on also affect the mechanical characteristics of the tissue. It activates your somatic motor system to constrict the tissues, to go into a muscle guarded state, to protect from the outside world threats. And so that also majorly can adapt your tissue and change the mechanics to go to a less functional, less mobile, more short type of state. So you really, when you think about mobility training, it's not just doing some stretching, and it's definitely not just working into the stretch. Definitely not. It has a lot to do with going to the proper meditative state, relaxing. That's why really the biggest effect of yoga is it's a physical meditation. But if you learn how I'm going to teach you today in terms of aligning your body and using exercise in the right way to match your mobility deficits, then you can take that type of meditative thought process and go very calm into doing your mobility training. Now you're targeting the full nervous system, you're getting your body in alignment, you're targeting the emotions, you're releasing trauma, breathing in through the nose, doing things I'm going to teach you at the end of the session to relax the nervous system. It's so crucial because the nervous system is one of the major components that's constricting that tissue. It's not just the rubber band effect of the tissue, okay? So that's all the things that are really important for you to know about neuromuscular setting. And now coming back into our slideshow here. All right, and lastly, total musculoskeletal structure. In other words, your genetics, like the length of your bones and your tissues, and just basically your genetics, okay? The genetic way that your mechanical system's structured and connects together, which we can't do a lot about changing that, but we can be aware through some of the testing that we do in our VIP system, or for you as our audience member, you can be aware that those are things and then address and try to make up for it to the best of your ability to strengthen and mobilize your body. Okay, now next we're going into the connective tissue, so the contractile fiber encasing. And you remember, this is all, if we go back, these are the two major factors, right? The two major factors of what determines your mobility, right? So the two major factors of what determines your mobility is the neuromuscular setting, which you learned a lot about just now, and then also the connective tissue. So we went through all of these items, and now we're getting into connective tissue, contractile fiber encasing. Let me show you a little image, then I'll stop the slides and I'll give you a good physical example and model so you can understand easily. Okay, so you don't need to become a biomechanist here, but I do want you to understand a few things. And so that is the paramecium. Okay, so John, can you, I can see you here, John Steyer. Can you see my cursor when I'm moving my cursor? Do you see that? Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, so paramecium is here, right? Let's start with endomecium. So these little pink round things, those are your actual muscle fibers, and the actual pink things are myofibrils. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about what those are actually where your tissues that actually make you move, and you go to lift something and your body is actually able to do it. That's the center of where the tissue actually functions. And I'm going to show you how that works here in a moment. But the encasing around the fiber is the endomecium. Okay, so that's that viscous tissue that is just the surrounding encasing fiber. It doesn't have any ability. Well, it has very limited ability, very, very, very limited ability to contract or actually do a function that's connected to your nervous system. Okay, it does have elasticity, so it does have some strength, but it's basically more so of a kind of like just a rubber band that's not connected to your body's electrical or nervous system. Also, the paramecium is the same and the epimecium is the same. Okay, that's all I really want you to know for now. I'm going to give you a physical representation here, but this encasing around the contractile fiber, right? And okay, so what's important about that? Why am I teaching all this science stuff? Because it's important for you to know how your body's mechanics work so you can address them and get, become the doctor of your own body. So the encasing around the fiber doesn't have as much it doesn't have the neurological connection like the contractile fiber does. The contractile fibers inside your muscle basically work like this. They have like these lines, and then they have these things that stick out and they crawl across the attachment points. Okay, so it attaches to one protein to the next, crawls to another, crawls to another. Your nervous system, when I go to lift something, my nervous system saying lift my arm, and I'm using those contractile fibers to move. It's not all the encasing that I showed you, the paramecium, endomecium, epimecium. That's more of just a rubber band that's around the contractile fiber. And the important thing to know about that is it's like this. So your contractile fibers basically work like this. They attach, right? And then they change the attachment point, all these little attachment points at a time, and they move, right? And then the encasing around the fiber, so all the connective tissue, not the contractile fibers, is more like this viscous tissue around that. It works kind of almost like an accordion. Is when you get into a long position, it does this, and when it gets all the way long, it starts to get really tight. Now, the important thing to know about this is that you can change the length of this tissue by stretching. So in other words, if you do a stretch in your calf and you just continue to hold it, this will get longer. It'll extend its accordion ability. And the contractile fibers, by doing so, they're not the thing that's stretching. You don't stretch your contractile fibers. They actually change only the mechanical characteristics. So imagine that accordion all wrapped around this fiber. And if you increase the mobility of the tissue, it will change its ability to have longer attachment points and grow more of these connection points. So the thing to know about that is that when you do stretching, it's actually really and by the way, a really interesting fun fact is if your tissue's short by having a poor seated posture, poor standing posture, all these things misaligned, sleeping on your side with one side lower back tight and your head like this, and all these funky positions that people sleep in and to misalign their body, they're shortening the tissue. So when you shorten the tissue, you can actually shorten up to 40%. So you can change the contractile portion of the tissue, because there's like hundreds of thousands and millions of these contractile structures in your muscles tissues. Okay, so what happens is as your tissue gets shorter, these things that make you move decrease by up to 40%. And when you lengthen the tissue, they can increase by up to 25%. So if we go from kind of like a more natural average state and go low and short, 40%, and then up to the optimal side, 25%. So most of you you have a big area of improvement to actually get more contractile fiber, more muscle, more mechanical function, and have better tissue overall function, right? So that's the way that your tissues work.
Robbie, let me
Yes.
ask you a question. So what is the benefit of the stretching and the not stretching with the things that you show and the case and all of these things?
Good question. Yeah. So the big takeaway thus far is the level of crucial effect and that your body alignment has, and training your tissues to be functioning in the long position and functioning well, and like the position you sleep in. That's why I say sleep on your back, so all your tissues are aligned. You don't have one side of your body doing funky things versus the other. So in terms of mobility training, which we will get into, We're going to get into the actual practical application next. This is kind of like the science and background behind the practical application. So we will get into that next. Do you have another question on that, Patricia?
No, thank you.
Okay. Awesome. How can you optimize your mobility? All right. So how can you optimize your mobility? So that is really the awesome thing that we need to find out next. And so first is you need to know where you are now. So where you're coming from, right? So where are you coming from? And our VIPs have a very specific way to do that. You've tested your lower body mobility starting this week to the actual degree. For our audience members that aren't testing your body to the actual degree, you kind of have to have a good idea of like, do you actually have a deficient range of motion in your hamstring, or does it just feel tight? Do your hip flexors, are they actually deficient, or they just feel tight? Honestly, the answer, and the only really, really good answer, which is the why I take our VIPs through the system, is you really need to measure your body mobility to the actual degree. Of course, would love everybody to be a VIP, but for now, for everybody to have a takeaway, the best thing is just consider, do you actually have tissue restriction there? Because if you don't really have tissue restriction, for example, right, here's a really good example. So a lot of people feel tightness in their upper back. Why? Is it short? Are the tissues short? Almost never. The tissues, almost never do have like scapular muscle tightness that, who walks around like this, like nobody's like this, but you get pains and stiffness in your back. So is the tissue tight? No, the tissue on the front is tight. And because the tissue on the front is tight, it's pulling your back long. And it's that signal in that neuromuscular setting and all the activations of how the tissues are working against each other that's making you feel like it's tight. So for those of you who haven't done mobility testing yet, or aren't in that process with us, and even for my VIPs, consider which tissues feel tight versus actually are restricted. And that's the reason why we measure to the actual degree, because for my VIPs, oh no, when pec minor is deficient on the right side, but not the left, actually tissue by tissue. And that is really the first huge step in terms of taking the science and making it totally practically applicable for you and getting great results. So how can you optimize your mobility? First, you need to know where you are now, where you're coming from. Next, you must know your mobility in all of the most important areas to the degree, ideally, so you can make judgments on how to address. And then this is why our VIPs measure their body mobility, body alignment. If you're a VIP, you're currently going through or have already gone through that process, as we talked about. So next, where do you want to go? Right? So where do you want to go? What exactly is the goal for where you want to go? And where you want to go is optimal mobility with neuromuscular resetting and connective tissue length. So what should you do to create that optimal mobility? First, you need to know, so what should you do exactly to create that optimal mobility? And that is really, there's using one of the 4 major types of mobility exercise. Now, what are the 4 major types of mobility exercise? And by the way, I should illustrate this a little bit further. What exactly is neuromuscular resetting and connective tissue length? What is optimal about that? So think about this. When you're stretching, right? In simple terms, we could just call it that. You're stretching the tissue. No, what you're really doing is you're thinking about, and that's what I teach so much in-depth stuff about the body mechanics to our VIPs, is you're learning what position your body's in and you're coming from. What are your misalignments and where do you need to be? Because what you're actually doing is neurologically recalibrating your entire body system with the nervous system, with the mechanical characteristics of the tissue. That's actually what you're doing. And then in the process, we have these tissue restrictions that regardless of what you're learning motor control wise in terms of motion and how should you be, these tissues can still restrict you. So if you go in and you elongate properly per your deficit, the connective tissue, right? Then you're targeting those connection points that actually contract and give your body strength. That's how you get optimal mobility. It's not just by stretching. It's not just by strengthening. And specifically, It's by targeting your mobility deficient areas. Okay. So that's the big thing for you to think about and take away from that. So what should you do to create that optimal mobility? We should do one of 4 major types of mobility exercise. That first major type is dynamic mobility. And what is dynamic mobility? Dynamic mobility is basically stretching with motion. So what it's really good for is getting your body primed for exercise. That's one of the big things. So if you watch like NFL or any major pro sport, televised sports, that they really show like a large team on the field beforehand and have pre-game shows, all that stuff, you'll see that the athletes are all doing, it looks almost like mobility work, like they're stretching, they're moving their arms, they're throwing the ball. Why are they doing that? Because they're prepping their body with mobility, stretch-based mobility with motion, right? Dynamic with motion. So mobility exercise with motion. And that's what it's really good for. It's also good for after you've stretched the tissue. So once you stretch the tissue and you've made that connective tissue, that's why the mechanics are so important. Once you've made that connective tissue longer, right? Now you really start to understand this stuff. Then what should you do? Well, you want to activate the contractile structure so that you have both the new tissue length and the usage of the new tissue length, so that you change the function of the tissue around the contractile fiber and you change the actual contractile fiber itself. So how you pair and use your mobility and when you use your mobility exercises are absolutely crucial. And I'm going to give you very specific structure on how to do that for everyone. Our VIPs, of course, will have even more specific structure, but I'll give all of you specific structure for this. Active static stretch. An active static stretch is simply doing a stretch where you have to do some action to get in and kind of hold the position. That's an active static stretch. This is typically best for taking that connective tissue, right? Taking the connective tissue and elongating it and getting this viscous connective tissue material to lengthen and change its characteristics. And that's what it's really best for. So it's really good to do after exercise and after a little bit of dynamic mobility exercise. It's really the best time to do that. And passive stretch. Passive stretch is the opposite of active. You don't really have to do anything. And we're going to do an example of each of these here in a moment. But passive stretch is like usually it has to do with someone else stretching you. Okay, it's someone else stretching you, putting you into position and kind of holding you and applying. So like a physical therapist, massage therapist, someone that's doing body work. But there is some ways, such as foam rolling your glute tissues and such with a ball and the raw wall. We have different exercises like this that you can also do passive mobility work to the tissue. And then functional range of motion. The fourth and major type of mobility exercise that you can do is a type of exercise that's strength training the end range of your motion. So what you're doing, right, with functional range of motion exercise is this. You're taking your connective tissue and you're putting it long. And then you're saying, okay, now that it's long, what happens to these contractile fibers? When they go long, these connective tissue, these contractile fiber points have very little connection points, right? So when that's long, when the connective tissue is long, you have very little attachment points, which is why it's not a good idea to do a ton of stretching and then try to do any high output exercise. It's a very nice way to get a muscle tear, because you start to change your connective tissue and you make the the contractile structure goes into these small spaces of actual connection points. So it can tear a lot easier, right? So functional range of motion is using a very light weight done in a very controlled way, going to the end range of motion and then doing a little bit out of the motion and back, a little bit out of the motion and back. What does that do? What's the secret to that? The secret to that is that this is greater stimulus, because this is more pressure, that it has less attachment point, which your body will respond with building more of these and longer of these. Now you have new tissue, longer tissue, and overall more functional tissue. And the amazing thing about that is when you develop the muscle and you develop your body alignment using all these proper mechanics, then what happens is it's really quite amazing, guys. You're literally start to produce more muscle. With more muscle, you develop more of this thing called the nucleus, which is like the blueprint shop of your cells. In other words, it's the thing that holds all the plans, that gets everything reconstructed, that makes you youthful, that builds all the new tissue. It sends out signals to everyone else saying, hey, we did good exercise today, everybody else be functional. You actually build more of those guys or gals in your muscle cells. And that actually gets overall better function in your tissues and all their function in the tissues as well. So what I'm saying here, and kind of this is a very unique takeaway, it's not talked about much in the fitness world at all, is by optimizing your body mechanics, your overall cellular function and all of the functional tissues will actually have more cell signaling to tell the rest of your body to be functional. Because what happens with aging is that when the mechanics decline, so do all the cell functions, less signaling for the tissues. And as your tissues decline, your whole body will decline because there's less communication and what we call crosstalk to all the other cells in your body. So this mobility stuff isn't just about like, oh, stretching your tissue or kind of stopping there, some, you know, a shallow depth of things that happen. It's major. It's a major types of transformation that happen in your body by optimizing your tissue mechanics. All right, let's continue on here. So what I would like to do next is let's practice one of each. So let's practice. Now let's get into some action. We've heard enough of Robbie being a professor. Oh, by the way, there's going to be a pop quiz at the end. And so, so I expect you all to ace this class. But yeah, so we're going to switch the Robbie professor hat. Let's go into the Robbie coach trainer hat, and let's practice one of each of these. So to make it really clear, the difference between the exercise from a practical standpoint, I'm going to focus on one type of tissue. And so the tissue is going to be hamstrings, right? And so it's good because that way you can see, okay, that's doing hamstrings, dynamic mobility, active static stretch, hamstrings, passive stretch, hamstrings, functional range, hamstrings. All right, so I'm going to need one outgoing VIP to be my model, and we're going to go through and practice dynamic mobility, active static stretch, passive stretch, and functional range. So Patricia, let's figure out which one of our awesome VIPs. I kind of feel like John would be a good option. He's a good outgoing guy. I'm not sure if he's in a place to do that, but, or if any other VIP wants to raise their hand and would like to be my exercise model for the day, I'd be happy to have you do it too. So who can do a good camera setup with me and be my exercise model?
Ken Miller raised his hand.
Ken Miller. All right, cool. So put Ken Miller, please, on the screen with me, Patricia. Hello, Ken. How are you, my friend?
Good. How are you?
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So the first exercise we're going to do is a walking field goal. So dynamic mobility for the hamstring. So I would like everybody to participate, everybody to turn your camera on. No, it's not mandatory, but it's a whole lot more fun if you participate. So turn your camera on, set it up somewhere where it probably can see you pretty well, and let's get after it. So, okay, so walking field goal is this. It's basically keeping, a lot of my VIPs know what this is. So you're keeping good upright posture, okay? And you're walking and you're kicking your leg up and forward to the side, okay? And so let's everybody, and just nice and easy. None of you are probably warmed up right now unless you've been working out while you're watching me. So let's not do any big crazy kicks. So let's walk through and do dynamic mobility of walking field goals. Go ahead. And let's just keep continuous. I'm going to talk to you a little bit. Yep, perfect. And you'll walk. And when the right foot places, it'll carry you forward. And the left. Yep. And now very important, make sure your pelvis stays neutral, right? Pelvis stays neutral, which means no butt tuck and no big back arch. Your pelvis stays nice and neutral, a little bit of intra-abdominal pressure, which kind of feels like what the abdomen does when you cough. So good contraction in the abdomen. Okay, continue. Here's what's happening as you're continuing. Your hamstring with motion is elongating the hamstring, which means both the connective tissue is elongating during the motion and the contractile tissue is elongating. What does that do? It's literally warming up your contractile tissue so that when you go to do strength training or other more aggressive form of training after this, your tissue is primed to have a good feedback and not feel like you went too aggressive into the next type of exercise, which you remember the whole emotional, mental trauma. This can translate to physical also. You don't want to attack your body with exercise. Usually there's not a good outcome. So this is priming the tissue with motion to do other types of exercise. Your heart rate will start to go up a little bit. Your blood flow will increase. And this is dynamic mobility. Okay. So for now, that was dynamic mobility. Now let's do active static stretch for the same tissue. So what you'll do is you'll sit on the ground and you'll put your legs out in front of you. So I'm not sure, Ken, if you're able to adjust your camera a little bit. Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, you could probably bring down just a little more, Ken, because we'll need to see more of the floor when you're. Yep, that works. That works. Okay, so let's nice, simple sit and reach. We're going to keep these exercises simple today. So scoot towards the wall just a little more, Ken, so we can see. Thank you, sir.
Get that up a little more.
So what you'll do is you'll sit on your butt. You'll make your knees nice and straight, and you'll just you'll reach out gently, right? Again, we're not that warmed up, so no muscle strains here. Nice and easy. Yeah, that's a sit and reach, and your back should stay pretty straight. Yeah, and so that's an active static stretch. You're having to reach for your toes, right? That's an example of an active static stretch. And what's happening here is primarily, you're not really doing a lot of nervous system activation. You're elongating the connective tissue, not so much the contractile fiber. But here's the big takeaway. Also, big takeaway. What is holding you back? Is it the contractile fiber or is it the connective tissue? For most of you, it's probably actually the contractile fiber. Why? Because the nervous system is saying, hey, guy or gal, you're at the end range of motion. We don't go past this. So I'm going to go ahead and contract your tissues. So what I want you all to do is take a nice deep breath in through your nose. And then I want you to actually create a vibration in your throat, which is going to activate your vagal nerve. So I want you to exhale nice and loud. If someone's in the room with you, they're going to think, what the heck are you doing? Okay. That's normal. If that's what they're thinking, you're doing a good job. So breathe in through the nose about 4 seconds and completely melt and just sigh and let out and totally relax. What you're doing is neuromuscular resetting. You're letting your neurological system say, it's okay. We can go past this point. You can go ahead and relax and continue doing that for another 20 seconds. Breathing in big through the nose. And as you relax and lean forward, and you should feel and totally let yourself go. No kind of self-focused thoughts of concerning about the size and all that stuff. That's what I want you to get rid of. I want you to totally relax. Okay. So what you just did is an active static stretch, and you got your nervous system to go to the parasympathetic state, activating the vagal nerve and relaxing. Very, very important. Okay. So now let's go ahead and lay on your back and put your legs on the wall. So this actually, you got the perfect setup, Ken. You'll just do a 90-degree turn. If anyone has a doubt what we're doing, go ahead and look at the right side of my screen with Ken here. So put your legs on the wall. I'll talk to you more about this one in a second. But before we start talking about the passive stretch, so go ahead and do exactly what you see Ken doing. So we're going to get more into this in the end, but since you have the physical example at this moment, when you do mobility training, don't just stretch, don't just reach for your foot and stuff. It's not going to work very well. You got to let your neurological system, you got to send it messages to say, it's okay. You can release, we're going to neuromuscular reset the tissue now. We're going to go longer. You don't have to guard, right? And when you do that thought process and the sighing and the breathing in through the nose and all this stuff, it makes a huge difference on your tissue mechanics. All right, so now we're in a passive stretch. So what is a passive stretch? It's a stretch where you don't do any activation. You're laying on your back, the wall's holding your legs. And by the way, if you have really tight hamstrings, not feeling tight, but mobility tight. In other words, when you bring your leg up straight in the air and the knees straight, you're nowhere near 90 degrees, nowhere near. That would be like a really tight hamstring. If you're only like 45, that'd be a really tight hamstring. So this is a great exercise for you to do, just to hang out and let those tissues go longer. Right. And now remember, when your tissues go longer and you start doing a stretch like this, which you could hold for like 10 minutes at a time, what do you need to do? You need to strength train the tissue in that position, and be careful, because now you're changing the mechanical characteristics of the tissue to go longer. So you don't want to overdo it when you get into strength training or running or sprinting or anything like this. All right. So that's this passive stretch that you're doing now. And you're not using any activation. Your wall's holding your legs. Okay. Now for the last one. Ken, do you have a band of any type, ideally moderate strength somewhere around? We can hang on for a moment too for you.
Yeah, I can run and get it.
Like one of our loop bands, like maybe the purple or the black one. So what I want all of you to do, for those of you who have bands, grab your bands, like probably, depending on your strength, let's go somewhere between red to black. Red to black. For those of you who do not have bands, you can get a belt, you can get any type of strap, anything. I'm going to basically have you hook it over your foot, okay? I'm going to end up having you hook it over your foot and kind of hold your leg with your arms. So anything, any kind of strap, belt, anything like that could work. And for my VIPs, you all have bands. Okay, Ken, so let's go ahead and lay on your back again. And then once you're on your back, I just want you to simply hook the band. Oh, turn the other way if you would. Yeah, but not on the wall. We won't use the wall anymore. Okay, so both legs will go straight out in front of you. Ken's our exercise model here. Good job, Ken. Bring your legs down, all the way, all the way, all the way. Yep. We'll bring one up. It doesn't matter which one you want to start with. There you go. And then hook the band over the top of the foot. Yeah, and you're strong enough. You could probably hook both sides. Yeah. Like just double it. Yes, like this. Yes, exactly. Yep, perfect. If I'm wrong, you can always go back to single band. You can adjust if you want. Okay, so here's our goal here, guys. See Ken in the right side of the screen. Your knee is going to be straight, right? Why? Because the hamstring attaches in the lower leg and then in the pelvis. So we want both joints to be stretched, so the hamstring goes long. And then what you would do, and you could focus more on using your contralateral hand. So if it's your right leg, you'll hold more so with the band with the left hand. You could grab all the loops, for example, Ken. Yeah. Okay. So what I want you to do is go comfortably, but to your end range of motion. So go all the way back to your end range of motion. No, end range. Yeah. Big stretch. Yes. Yeah. But don't kick it there, right? Because you got the band. Yeah. Now, okay. Now here's a good point, right? So now we got the band, we got a load, we're adding load to the stretch. So you don't want to like kick, you want to go easy into the position. Okay, find your end range of motion. So what I want you to do is go to end range, which means it feels a big stretch. Yep. And then slowly go out of the end range a few degrees. Yes. And come back. You got to keep your arm where it's at so that it has a fixed point to work from. And you can use both hands on the band if you want. So what you're going to do is go to end range and then let your leg come down like 10, 15 degrees and then back. And you just go end range and then back and forth. End range of motion, big stretch, out of big stretch, out of big stretch. But you don't do a full range. You just do that small motion of like 15 degrees of end range. Okay, here's what we're doing. Now we're doing functional range of motion. And if you want to switch to single band, if you think it's better, that's okay too, Ken. So what we're doing is we're taking the connective tissue to its end range, and the same thing is happening that happened with the active static. You're getting towards the end and your nervous system's going, we're as far as we like to go, and now we need to contract. So what you're doing is you're training your tissue to go to end range and be comfortable and create contraction and be able to sustain the end range position, which is specifically training the mechanical characteristics of the tissue to be stronger and develop more of those cross connection protein things that I talked about, which are called sarcomeres. You're going to develop more of those by training at that end range position only, because now you're going to develop strength at the end range. So that's the benefit of functional range of motion. The best time to do this is when you're good and warmed up and or at the end of the workout, that's a good time to do this as well. It's a high stimulus exercise. And occasionally during this exercise, you can do a full rep. In other words, you go to your opposite end range of motion, and then you can come back up into that stretch position. So those are all of the 4 major types of mobility exercise. So very good. Thank you. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate you being our exercise model today. Good job, everyone. That was awesome. So we learned about dynamic mobility, active static stretch. You know what that is. Dynamic mobility is great for warm up and it's with motion. Active static stretch is we move into the position and hold. Passive stretches, you don't do anything while you stretch. And functional range is where we train that end range position of the tissue. You learned about some of the mechanics of that. And now how and when to apply your neuromuscular setting. In other words, the mobility training exercises. Well, we have, Patricia will drop in the chat for you this document here. It actually, Patricia, can you share this document on your screen? It would be better. All right, so let's start at the top of the page. Okay, so what I'm showing you here is a handout that I'm going to give you. We'll post it in the chat here in a moment. So it's a separate document that you'll be able to reference. And also VIPs, I have a couple more of these uniquely for you in addition that use all your mobility solutions tied to your deficiencies and all that. I'll explain in a moment. But for all members in today's show, we have the wake up pre-training body alignment routine. So this is a great routine to do when you wake up. It's also a great routine to do before anytime you do exercise, especially before you do higher, like moderate intensity exercise, okay? Oh, you also could do this routine at any time throughout the day. So you would choose 2 of these dynamic mobility exercises. I've given you 4 here. In your document, they will link to actual video demonstrations. You could do all the exercises. There's nothing wrong with that. But of course, it just takes more time. So I'm giving you 2 dynamic mobility exercises. You would choose 2 from the list. Let's go ahead and scroll down, Patricia. So then you have choose 2 active static stretches. So this category here is active static stretches. You would choose 2 of those. Best way to do this is do all of them and then figure out after that which 2 you'd like to choose. That's going to be giving you your best results. And it also is a little bit of kind of self-analysis for our audience members who are not VIPs. You can do the exercise and then you can see which ones you felt most restricted. You actually had a deficiency in range of motion. And then that way you can target your tissues that are more restricted. And then lastly, choose 1 to 2 dynamic mobility or functional range of motion exercises from these 3. Also practice all, and then choose your favorite that address your body. Awesome. Okay, so with that, we'll go back into, the next thing, if you can also share. Okay, so let's go ahead and post that in the chat, that document for everyone. And then VIPs. So while our audience members are looking at that, Patricia will go ahead and post that in the chat now. So you'll have your own version of that. It's in the chat now. Go ahead and take a look at that. That's yours to keep, of course. And then all the exercise demos are on there. Okay, so for VIPs, of course, you have some elevated structure from me. So what we're going to do, Patricia, if you can share the VIP structure. So for VIPs, this later today, this will be posted in your downloadables under your VIP portal. And so you have your VIP prescription for wake up, pre-training body alignment routine. I know that's probably a little hard to see. Maybe you can expand that a little more, Patricia, even if it cuts off some of the, thank you, perfect. So you'll choose 2 dynamic mobility, VIPs. Which 2 dynamic mobility? Well, go into mobility solutions on your VIP portal, watch the video, and then you'll see that, you'll see how to choose which categories to address with your body's mobility. So what I'm saying is, go in, pick your specific exercise, but now you're literally, you're creating like a prescription. You're basically diagnosing based on your mobility assessments. Then you're able to choose based on the video that's in your mobility solutions. And in case you're not sure what I'm talking about, okay, so then go to mobility solutions, click on mobility solutions. And for all of our VIPs who are doing mobility testing this week and in a couple weeks on your upper body, watch this video. That's going to tell you, well, Robbie, how do I know which dynamic mobility? Watch this video. It will tell you. Okay, Patricia, go ahead and share again. So it's on your VIP portal, fitnessdoctorvip.com. Watch this video. It's going to give you lots of insight for you specifically as a VIP. And then VIPs, if you choose 2 dynamic mobility exercises addressing your mobility deficiencies, which again, the video on the mobility solutions will tell you, and then choose 2 active static stretches, choose 1 to 2 dynamic mobility or functional range of motion. And the big takeaway for you is like, do exactly as I showed in the general prescription on the previous document. You're going to have a lot more than 2 dynamic mobility. You might have like a total of 25, or you might only have 13 if you don't have that many deficiencies. But over time, go through all of them and see which one your favorites are. That's why it's actually better than me writing it and giving it to you specifically, because you're able to match it to your deficiencies, see which ones you like the best, agree with your body the best. So once you understand that structure, it's going to be the same for your VIP prescription post-training routine. So starting in 2 weeks at level 2, you'll start doing your 3 to 4 active static stretches at the end of your workouts. And then you'll do an optional addition of choose 2 functional range of motion. And you'll know exactly, once you watch that mobility solution video, you're going to know exactly which ones, the categories to go into. So you go through, and over time, it's not going to happen in the first week. Pick a few. It won't happen in the first week, but over time, you'll be able to fill those in. And then again, that will be for our VIPs and the downloadables on your dashboard on the VIP portal. And also Patricia will drop that in the chat too, just to make it easily accessible. And if you have any questions about that over time, let me know and I'll help you with it further. All right, so let's continue in for everyone. All right, so how to make it even better, right? So now that you learned all this awesome stuff about mobility training, you've practiced some exercise, I've given you very specific structure, the exact exercise. For our VIPs, I gave you structure to actually match where you have your specific deficiencies and which exercise to do first, second, how many of them, when to do them. I've given you the exact structure to do that. But how do we make it even better? Well, we make it even better by optimizing the neurological component of your mobility training. Now, remember, it's not just about going in and stretching your tissues. It's about getting your nervous system to go quiet, especially even in dynamic mobility, active static stretch, passive stretch, all of those is really getting, and even in functional range of motion, it's really about getting your nervous system to quiet, to not muscle guard, to relax any tension you're feeling, to expel it, to use relaxation techniques such as the sighing, the when you exhale. What does that do? There's a very specific thing. It vibrates the vagal nerve, activates the vagal nerve. The vagal nerve activates some parasympathetic responses, okay? So in your autonomic nervous system, which is basically the nervous part of your nervous system that's setting the stage for, are you like on high alert and activated and fight or flight response? Or are you more on the rest and digest and calm and tranquil and mindful type of mindset, right? That's parasympathetic. This is sympathetic. So you want to go parasympathetic. One great way, the sign when you're doing your relaxing and you're doing your stretching, mobility exercises. The other big thing to do is, as you do this, you can lay on your roller, get your back nice and straight. And what you do is just put your arms out, relax, and lateral motion. So they actually have research on looking laterally. Normally we're looking like in the straight position, but your peripheral vision, by looking laterally, you help activate the vagal nerve. You'll also help activate that parasympathetic and relaxation response. So if you're feeling stressed, you can literally just look laterally, especially when you're outside and you're not just having all the screen time and phone time that we're all subjected to throughout the day. Get a big distance view, go ahead and look to the left. And what you'll find normally is when you lay on your back and you look to the left, you'll either have the usually a yawn or the desire to swallow, right? And so this is telling you that, yes, your vagal nerve has been activated, which connects with the heart and other vital organs, the digestive system. And then this signaling causes your body to produce something called acetylcholine. And this acetylcholine starts going and triggering other nervous system activated tissues in your body and getting everything to calm. Lay on your back, look left till you yawn, look right. And then, which actually I feel, I did so much now, I'm starting to feel like I'm going to yawn just here on the show. So look left, look right. It's going to be amazing. Try it. I've done it in one of our VIP sessions and all of you are like, oh, wow, that's amazing. I did yawn. So all those things are really important because it's not just about mobility training. It's about knowing where your deficits are, addressing your specific deficits, not just, oh, that tissue feels tight. No, 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 no. You actually have mechanical accuracy of knowing which tissues are restricted, and then using the nervous system quieting things I talked about. Doing all that is going to give you amazing results. And with that, I'll turn it over to you for questions.
Good job. This was really good, Robbie.
Oh, thank you. You're my biggest fan.
Yes, I am.
Oh, and then for our VIPs, so we give first dib access to our VIPs to ask questions. So in case you're not aware of this, you go to the bottom of your Zoom bar, go to reactions, click on reactions, and then you can click raise hand. And that'll give you the ability for me to see who would like to ask a question or connect with me or share anything. So that's how you would do that for participating in Q&A.
Okay, so my question was just the last exercise. You said lay on your back on your roller. And where exactly do you place your roller? At your shoulders, in your lower back? And does it matter? Are you rolling back and forth on it, or?
Yeah, Patricia, can you grab me the roller, please? Can you go and grab me the roller? Thank you. So I'll show you. I'll show you in just a second. It'll be like about a minute before I'm able to show you, but I'll show you. No, you can just bring the roller. Is there another question also?
Not right now, sorry.
So I'll start explaining to you, and then I'll give you a physical representation as well. So you're going to lay on it long ways. So it's going to go from your tailbone to your head, right? So you want it to go, it's not you can lay it on the other way, and it's good to like roll your lower back tissues in a very specific way. Some people, it's a little healthier than others. Like if you really have a weak core or you have more frailty, which you don't, Janie, but those who do, it's not a good idea to lay on it like this way, right? Even on your back. So you need to be a little more careful and really activate your core, but specifically laying on the roller like this and laying down, right? I'm showing you standing up, but laying down. And then one thing you want to do is here. So here in your lower back, where you'd have like an arch, you don't want to have that arch. You want to keep your back flat against the roller. So you take your pelvis and you set it more, especially like for you, you have a little bit more of that lordotic curve. So you're going to take your pelvis and put it more towards posterior, relax, and you can put the arms out. So what the research shows on that connective tissue length is the longer within reason is better, but we need to be careful with intensity. So a great thing, low intensity, lay on the roller, put your arms out like this. You can hang out there for 5-10 minutes at a time, do little light arm motions, which are in your mobility solutions also for external rotation of the shoulder. And you can do that laying on the roller. It's a great thing. You can watch TV at night, listen to an audiobook, whatever. And that's a great thing. Like for me, I don't sit on the couch. Like 15% of my relaxing time will actually sit on the couch. 80% of it is on the roller, and another, I don't know, whatever, 5 or 10% that's left, I'll do some different exercises while I'm in my relaxed mode.
Right. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hello, Shoshana. Welcome.
Hi, Robbie. Can you hear me?
I can. Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to also show you, I have learned that exercise about the vagal nerve. You can also just put your hands on your neck and put your eyes at 3 o'clock, and you'll be yawning within 20 to 30 seconds. So if you're not wanting to lie down, this is also a way to do it that I've been taught that is amazing, and you can do it anywhere standing up. And you just put your eyes at 3 o'clock or eyes at 9 o'clock, and within a minute you're yawning. It's so wonderful because your vagus nerve is a monster.
Yes.
You really
Yes,
wanna
for
calm
sure.
that thing down.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. You can do it. You can do it sitting too. But for me, specifically giving instruction on how to lead into mobility training, I like to use the lying position because there's some other things that changes in the body's physiology. To lie, specifically lying, the roller starts to align the spine, let your body relax, and then do. But yeah, it is a great point. Like you can do it at any time throughout the day as well for a good reset. Yeah.
So a lot of my limitations, and I'm not making excuses, is I've got severe arthritis from C1 to C7
Mhm.
in my neck, and severe arthritis in S1 to L5. And that's a large part of my ability to do some of these things, because it's painful and stiff, both. So can I overcome some of that through these?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm not of the school of thought, but there is a school of thought that I've seen be effective. I think it's way too extreme. And I think, certain people get too into drinking their own Kool-Aid, so to speak, like they're recommending it. So now they have to believe it with everything. I'm more about like what works and what the science says and what I see works with our clientele. But there's a school of thought that like most back pain and most body pains and stuff is only emotional and mental, and that you can process through that. And like, it's normal to have spinal degeneration. And there is like Dr. Sarnos, the great pain deception and stuff. But it's like anything with the body of knowledge. Like on one side, there's this extreme, and on the other side, there's extreme. Usually truth is somewhere in the middle, right? Somewhere in the middle, depending on the subject. So I do believe that there is a strong mental, emotional component to pain, stiffness, dysfunction. There's all these mechanical characteristics. There's your body's somatic response to having certain degeneration and arthritis. And I think that no, it's not only emotional, mental for most people, but there is a degree of that. So by doing the mobility training, by finding that parasympathetic state, you're going to get some results just from that. Then the mechanical characteristics being totally on point, being based on your actual mobility assessments to the degrees, optimizing your body's mechanical alignment, training in such a way that you're activating your tissues in a more aligned way. Your body wants a muscle guard yet less, and bringing all that together, I feel you'll have like a 99.99999% likelihood of massive improvement. Massive. Yeah.
Really? Wow.
Massive.
Okay.
Is the arthritis going to go away or going to regrow cartilage because of the process? No. But the way your nervous system is interpreting and the way your tissues are muscle guarding and the restrictions that the pain and stiffness over time has affected these tissues. They also get adhesions and get knotted up and all these things. You can work through so much of that there's so much less stacking of negative factors going against you. You start to pull away a lot of those issues where you're just left with just the actual arthritic effect, which is only a component of what you're feeling, right?
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think you got a lot of progress to potential ahead by applying all those things.
That is great to hear.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I've seen it happen. Like I'm speaking from seeing many people who commit to the process that make those transformations. Yeah.
Okay.
Much love to you, brother. I'm with you every step of the way too. We'll get through it together. Any doubts along the way, you just let me know. I'm here for you.
I lost cartilage on the base of my thumb, so I actually had to take collagen to regrow my cartilage, and I don't have bone pain, so that's great. And my hands, actually, I used to have hand arthritis too. I couldn't move my hands at all, so that's one of the things. And I took turmeric too, so I shouldn't have had to do all these things in my 40s, but I kind of got my problems. But yes, those exercises looked really good. I like the one on your back with the legs on the wall. Actually, my back actually adjusted, which was weird because I've never done that before.
Yeah.
So my boyfriend usually lifts me up to adjust my back, so it adjusted there. So it was a stretch that I didn't think of doing. I never started putting my legs on the wall. So some of the ideas have really helped. So I'll start doing those stretches too. So thank you so much. Today was very good. I love the scientific part. I actually took biology in school, but I
Lucy,
am
can I
colorblind.
tell you something?
What?
I want to tell everybody that is in this meeting that Lucy is a person very super impressive. She has some difficulties in her life, but she does not give up, always looking for help, always looking for improvement. And I am very proud of you, Lucy. It's absolutely awesome to see that you stick with it and you do it and you improve.
Many doctors now, and nobody's actually figured out what was wrong with me. They all sent me away, and I've had chronic pain since I was 19. So that's the last 26 years. So, and nobody really helped me with why I was having it. And it's an autoimmune disease, which means high doses of vitamin D actually reverse vitamin turmeric tea and cocoa and all that. They have reishi mushrooms in it to relax the body as well. And it has like other things in there as well that help to relax the body and your inflammation. And I've been doing that for the last 2 years. My inflammation in my hands and my whole body have totally gone down. It's expensive, but if you're doing it temporarily, it's a really good thing to get. Like if you look at the people who have bought it, they've actually reversed their arthritis within 2 months completely. So that's a really good company. And I did a lot of stuff in BioTrust when it comes to my collagen, because they do the 5 types of collagen. I'm not a type of person to just one type. That's not going to get you all the collagen that you need. So yes, I've learned a lot. I had no choice. When you're having health issues, you have no choice but to help yourself.
Well, thank you, Lucy.
You're
If you'd
welcome.
like, you can.
I like to share that with other people, because
Yeah.
you know there are
Well,
other people in the group that will probably, it's nice for them to hear too.
Feel free to post a link about the product in the chat in case anyone's interested in what you shared.
Okay, that's great. I'll post it in the chat.
That's a good question. So Randa's question was, you know, for our VIP specifically, where you know you have a deficiency, should you stay in one category and use the exercises for just that category? And that answer depends on your amount of deficiency. So for example, if you test all your upper body mobility and then you see that like 1 or 2 things are deficient, then you'd focus heavily in those 1 or 2 things. If 3 or 4, then you'd more spread it out among 3 or 4. And then the video on the mobility solutions tells you specifically like target here, here, here. There's 3 top areas you want to focus in your body. And that's if you have symptoms in an area and you have a mobility deficiency in that area, that's the first area you want to address. Then one side of your body is less mobile than the other. That's the second side. That's the second focal point. Third is that both are deficient. And so you go in order of magnitude. In other words, where you have like a lot of symptom or a lot of deficiency, and then you go down those 3-step list, right? That's how you really figure that out. And it's a long process. It's not a long session, but it's weeks, it's months, it's lifetime. You start with the active static stretches at the end of your workout, and then over time you build in a mobility routine for morning. You can end up doing sometimes full mobility routines, just do a whole session, and we have all that planned out for you now in that guide that we've provided in today's session. A question from Darren about your legs being straight or bent on the roller, and it's good to do both. The nice thing about bent knee, if you have restriction and going into internal rotation of the femur, so internal rotation of the hip, you can put your knees bent, and you can like drop one leg in and then drop the other leg in. You kind of stretch your hips one at a time. So it's another really nice thing to do on the roller. But it's also good to go, as long as with your legs straight when you're laying on the roller, you don't want your legs to be straight and then causing a back arch that you can't keep down because your legs are straight. So that's one problem that you could have with legs straight. Otherwise, legs straight are good, because it's going to stretch the hip flexors.
Thank you, Robbie.
Yes.
Is it fair to assume that we phase out of the lower body mobility and upper body mobility over time and focus on the 4 sectors on our own, or do we just drop back in and out, or are you recommending that we stay with the 1 hour plus sessions with you, and then on on our own time, do the four mobilities.
Oh yeah, no, mobility training is not a replacement of biomechanically optimized training. Yeah, no, it's that's why I kind of have like more morning routine and like post training routine. So for example, in level 2 as a VIP, it'll be 7 minutes at the end of your session. It's planned into the session. We go to a timer and some nice soft music, and we do your mobility solutions at that time, starting in level 2. So that's not this coming week, but the week after. That'll start in lower body, and then in level 3, upper body will become the same. What else to tell you? So that's why I give you 3 different routines, because some are going to be like, hey, I'll just start at the end of the routine. I have enough time for that. Others are going to, okay, I like this mobility routine in the morning also. And others are going to say, what's next? I want a full mobility routine matched to me. Okay, so then I created the structure in that guide for you to have that full mobility routine. So it's really up to you. Other big thing in terms of the great questions that you're asking to think about is mobility exercises are kind of interesting, because a lot of those exercises fall into this category that you do it forever. Like there's certain exercises I do, like I have my morning routine and I do it every morning, and I don't see me really making much changes for years and years and years. And I'll stay doing the same mobility routine every day, because what I'm doing is I'm taking that connective tissue and I'm elongating it in the morning. So then I'm getting my tissues that are now going to start functioning to be in that optimal alignment, because I've removed any connective tissue restriction. And you're going to be the same way. You're going to have your own patterns. And so from matching those mobility deficiencies and in time, trying all the exercise, you're going to find the ones that are like, oh, wow, like there will be for each of our VIPs exercise, like, oh, wow, I really feel so much more aligned, so much different. And those are going to be your go-tos that are like your daily mobility exercises. But remember, it's really important, because these questions open up for a lot of depth. Mobility is to open up that tissues and retrain the neurological system. But in the biomechanically optimized strength training that we do in our VIP system, that is where you're optimizing the mechanics with strength. So you got to have the mobility component and the stability and the conditioning component that'll come also in those sessions. So you really need both.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Great questions.
Did I miss something with the roller? I have a roller, but I have not seen anything from you about using the roller. So I must have missed something.
Yeah, no, I start to talk about it sometimes, like in the shows, or like laying on the roller. I mentioned laying on the roller, but in it's either level 2 or 3, we start some exercises laying on the roller. And then we have mobility sessions where we use the roller and we do foam rolling. We really get into a decent usage of the roller. We talk about laying on it actually in the session, how you should lay on it, how to support your neck if your neck doesn't agree with going straight, like potentially for you would be good. And there's roller exercises in the mobility solutions that have the roller included.
So I've got a roller, but it's not as long as the one you just showed, the black one. Mine's about 18 inches long, so I didn't buy one. I already had it. Is that going to work?
No.
It's not.
No, you need like, I mean, this one is the high density, but I recommend the medium density for our VIPs.
This is what I have.
Yeah, no, I recommend, no.
That's
You'll
not
end
gonna
up, nope.
Nope.
No, you want to have the long roller. Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad I asked.
Yeah. It's a step 2 on the welcome page for VIPs on the equipment list.
I bought almost everything except the roller.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, like what we have in the equipment list, we use. Like I'm giving you those things in the equipment because that's exactly what we use in the training system. Yeah.
Okay. I just thought I already had one. Why buy one? So
yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Because we'll lay on it and stuff, and it especially for you with the arthritic S1 through L5, you need to be fully supported. Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Yeah, so like putting a pillow and trying to figure out how to modify. No. Yeah, you don't want to do that. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And Bob and Jeff, I see your hand up, but I'm not sure if it's still up. No, okay, I can remove for you. And then Jeff, your hand is up. I'll bring you back on here with me.
Yeah, so I forgot to mention this before. Will there be some opportunity either as a regular part of the program early on or as a added fee for service kind of thing to talk to you or Patricia about our particular body peculiarities? So in my case, I discovered through my chiropractor, who just happened to take a spinal X-ray on induction, that I think it was on my L5 vertebrae. It's malformed, and I have a 10-degree kink in my lumbar spine, and that's one peculiarity. I've torn my gastrocnemius on my right side halfway across 40 years ago. And that side is extra long. And there are peculiarities like that. Will there be a chance to interact with you or Patricia or somebody else to get guidance as to how these exercises might be modified or focused in some way to recognize those weird body things?
There's not really a lot of changes needed necessarily in the mechanical structure. So first of all, to answer your question directly, I will give you that education over time. For example, today you learned about, or you will if you missed part of the show, connective tissue and how it works. How when it gets long, then this contractile tissue can tear. So you should say, oh, better be careful on that right side, especially if it was more recent, right? And it sounds like it wasn't that recent, but if that tissue is longer and the tissues are modified, because I might be more exposed to tearing, so I'm going to be careful and control my load, that the amount of load that I use in training. So then the other thing, so that's an important consideration. Another important consideration is when we start getting into the physical fitness scorecards, there's a musculoskeletal section that you'll fill out that have you had issues? Do you have dysfunction or stiffness in these areas? Oh, yes, in my ankle, my left ankle, my right hip. So as you get into that, then what we'll do is we'll modify the intensity that's placed on that part of your body, and we'll give you feedback. Like, don't go past 65% effort on the area that you had symptomatic issues on. So we have that all part of our structure.
Okay, good.
So I have a lot of those things built in, and then we do have VIP Platinum. VIP Platinum is where you meet with Dr. Justin or another one of our orthopedic doctors once a week. So you get additional help once a week, and then Fabricio jumps in and can create some extra customization to your training system as well. So that's in our VIP Platinum. But we have in our regular VIP system, we have a lot of, like, between Q&A and then these type of sessions and then the physical fitness scorecard. I mean, we have a lot of support structure to make sure everything stays on point. The last part I should share with you, because this is beneficial for everybody to hear, is the way we teach mechanics is good for humans, even if you have scoliosis, even if you have some other issues, because you still need to work on keeping the pelvis neutral. You still need hip, knee, foot in line. You still need, there's certain mechanical principles that we'll teach with intra-abdominal bracing and thoracic extension and all these things that will just help alleviate and lessen the stress of those mechanical deficiencies that you have. So it's rooted on knowing that the majority of people aren't just this perfect mechanical structure, and it's taking them towards the ideal and considering all those factors.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Alice, you have a question, or you're waving? You're waving. All right. Okay, so much love to all of you. Make it an amazing weekend. This video, this show will be edited and sent to you, so you'll be able to see all the content again. If you have any questions, let me know. VIPs.
And next week, Dr. Ali.
Oh, thank you. So next week, we're having kind of an interesting, it's kind of unique. Like for us, we're actually going to have a segment dedicated on vision, right? Your vision's pretty important. How you see, how you optimize your eye health. And there's all this talk about blue light and how much effect that has on you and stuff. And it's interesting because, who should really talk about that is a person who's an eye expert. Like that's what they do. They're at a university level, professor, clinical researcher, clinician as well. And so I have that level of individual coming in next week, Dr. Ali Hoppert, and she's going to talk to us all about vision health and things to consider and to optimize your visual health. So that'll be a really interesting segment and somewhat unique for our show. And that will be occurring next Saturday. You'll get an email this week on exactly that. So much love to you. And I look forward to seeing you this week in training for our VIPs and for our audience members. Take care. And I'll see you also very soon. Much love.